So are people sleepwalking into poverty? I think a lot of people are. I think there's a lot of people that are told, you've got to invest in a pension, blah, blah, but don't really understand what that means, how the maths work. Let's look at some stats, shall we? What do you think is the average pension pot in the UK at retirement?
So this is the amount that's in their pot that's going to last them the 20, 30 years until, which has got to cover every expense that you've got going.
£600,000 is the target investment pot that you need.
There are answers to the issue of people sleepwalking into poverty as they go towards retirement age, but you have to take the action. Before we jump in, let's tackle one of the biggest hurdles for property investors: finding the best buy-to-let locations for top returns. Over the years, we've helped countless individuals pinpoint the most profitable locations and maximise their rental income. To make it easier for you, we've put together a free guide to buy-to-let hotspots for 2025, designed specifically for you to understand the market, stay ahead of the trends, and it even includes a list of our top 10 locations in the UK. Get it now for free by clicking the link in the description below and start building your property portfolio today. Welcome to This Property Life podcast, where we dive deep into the world of property investment and uncover the strategies that can transform your financial future. Today, we're tackling a topic that many shy away from: a wake-up call on why traditional pensions might not be enough to secure your retirement dreams. For too long, people have buried their heads in the sand, thinking of retirement as a distant me problem. But the truth is, waiting until you're 60 to figure it out might be too late. In this episode, we'll explore how property investment can serve as a powerful financial safety net, offering stability and growth long before you hang up your work boots. Joining me today is my fellow host, Nick Claydon. Nick, are people sleepwalking into poverty?
Well said, that was my line.
Oh, I'm so sorry I stole it.
Hi, Sarah. Yeah, this is a big kind of passion of mine, I think. And it was sparked by a couple of, I wanted to do this episode, talk about this, because there was a couple of things I read fairly recently that kind of prompted it. Since when I've done a little bit of a deep dive into this subject. I thought it'd be a good one to talk about. Okay, so are people sleepwalking into poverty? I think a lot of people are. I think there's a lot of people that are told, you've got to invest in a pension, blah, blah, but don't really understand what that means and how the maths work. And when you do look at the maths, I think a lot of people are massively underestimating the amount of money they need to put into a pension in order to live a reasonable standard of living in the future when they retire. And I think it comes down to a lot of things that we talk about, which is having a vision, having a plan. I don't think anyone plans to retire into poverty. Right. So why would you plan to work your entire life and then retire into poverty? And by poverty, I mean basically not being able to do things you want to do. You're not having enough money to live, really, a reasonable standard of living. And I think that is where a lot of people are going without a plan. They're just literally living week to week, month to month. And as you say, just filing it in their brain under future me problem. I'll worry about it later. Which is risky.
It is. And I think people are quite aware now that our state pension and the pension age that you're going to get the pension age is moving, ever away from us. And I think people are quite aware that the amount you're going to get in the state pension isn't going to cover life and life expenses when we're older. But do they know how much their private pensions are, if they've even got one? And if they know how much it is as a lump sum, do they know what that translates as a yearly amount to live on?
I think very few people would know that. I mean, firstly, let's just caveat this and put it out there. We are not pensions advisors. We are not financial advisors. Okay, all we're doing is I'm just going to talk through some facts. We'll talk about our opinions, but please do go and speak to financial advisors and just take what they say. Actually quiz them. If you do have a financial advisor and they're talking to you about pensions, you really want to drill into the numbers here and really take responsibility for understanding what it is you're chucking percentage of your salary into every month and what that actually means. I talk to a lot of people about this, and I even ask them, "Where's your pension invested?" And even if people know, they'll say, "Oh, it's with Standard Life or Scottish Widows." Say, "No, no, that's just the company. That's just the investment manager. What is it actually invested in? Do you know?" And 1% of people might know what their pension is actually invested in. Yeah, we could talk all day about, creative stuff with pensions, and that would maybe be a future episode, I think, where we talk about how you can take control with like SIPs and SAS pensions, to really take control of things. I think there's so many people out there that just don't even, that it's just like, I'm not even worried about that now. I'll worry about that later. Got bigger problems today. Okay, let's look at some stats, shall we? This might be a bit of an eye opener. I'll go. So, what do you think is the average pension pot in the UK at retirement age?
Okay, so we're talking private pensions
Yeah.
here, not state pensions. That's a completely separate part of this. So this is the amount that's in their pot that's going to last them the 20, 30 years until, you know, that thing happens. I mean, I guess it's got to be six figures, anywhere. Everyone's different, but I'd say the average has got to be at least 150 to 200. I mean, that's what I would expect the very bare minimum would have to be.
Average pension pot in the UK at retirement is 37,000.
Right. So you're saying that 37,000 is the lump sum in there and that's got to last however many years you're going to need it.
Yeah. So that's the average pension pot, right? Based on let's say a 4% drawdown, which is what a lot of investment managers advise. Yeah. So if you take, there's two ways of taking your pension. You either buy an annuity or you draw down on your private pension. I can talk about both those methods. But one of them, the annuity essentially is a fixed amount. So you buy your annuity at whatever rates they are at that moment in time, and that pays out, for the rest of your life, but it's generally not inflation linked. Okay. So your pot doesn't run out, but if inflation goes up, let's look at the last few years, what's happened. Yeah.
Yeah.
Then, essentially your purchasing power of that money diminishes. The other way is a drawdown, where you take a percentage of your pension and leave the rest of it invested. You can decide how much you draw down, but obviously the more you draw down, the more it will reduce your pot. So most investment managers would advise, say, an average return of 8% a year with your fund invested in something like, let's say, the S&P 500. So you take half of that, 4%, and that should sustain the pot and give you an income. So that's what I'm going to base these figures on for the moment. Okay, so if your average pension pot's 37,000, your actual annual income will be £1,480, which means a monthly income of £123 based on a 4% drawdown.
Now, monthly, you're going to get £123 arrive in your bank account, which has got to cover every expense that you've got going. So that's at the very basic level, that's your rent, if you're still renting. It's your heat, light, food.
Yeah, everything. Assuming you get the state pension as well, that's 11,500 a year as it currently stands. So let's call that 1,000 a month. So you basically £1,123 per month.
Yeah. So if you are still renting, you're absolutely screwed.
Yeah.
If you're lucky enough to have owned your own home and have that unencumbered, that's going towards your heat, power, and food, and then anything left over to go out and have a coffee or spoil the grandkids or buy some clothing. That is a pretty stark and depressing picture.
Yeah, it is. I don't think many people have any idea about that, about what it actually means. By any stretch, 12 grand a year is not living the dream. It's if you look at the glossy brochures for pension companies, it's all like the silver foxes in their 60s and 70s, sipping champagne on a boat or cruising around the world. 12 grand a
Yeah.
year is not doing that, is it?
That is just not going to happen.
Right.
And if you factor, into that, I guess a lot of people of a certain age, potentially our age, are probably very much head in the sand, future me problem, as you've mentioned. And perhaps in the back of their minds, they're relying on some sort of potential inheritance
Yeah.
to dig them out of this hole. And we all know that as we are an aging population, and anyone that has had family members go into homes or care provide establishments, we know the cost of those establishments is likely to eat up some inheritance, if not lots of inheritance, coupled with inheritance tax laws that have changed
Yeah, haven't they?
recently. Is the safety net of relying, if you're in a position where you can rely on, or think that you might be able to rely on inheritance to take you out of this hole, is that even a possibility?
It's a possibility, but I mean, I don't think anyone can really rely on it. I see articles in the papers like every week about, baby boomers and, hoarding all the wealth, and I think the next generations are expecting that wealth to filter down. But as you say, care home fees at the moment? I've some a friend of mine, his dad was in a care home. I think it was just insane amounts of money.
Yeah, I think it's like 1 to 2,000 a week.
I think his one was like 2 grand a week. So we're talking about 8.5, 9 grand a month. Now, if you're expecting a lump sum of a couple of 100 grand,
That gets swallowed quickly.
that is gone. That is gone. It's gone very, very quickly. So I don't think anyone should be or can rely on it or should be relying on it. For me, this is about control. Come back to that, but just going back to the averages, right? So there were some other stats here. So for women in their 60s, yeah, the average pension pot at age 67 or in their 60s is actually 152,000. Okay.
Okay.
Right. So that's a slightly better amount. But even what does that mean? Okay. So what that means is on a 4% drawdown, that would be 6,000, just over £6,000 a year, 6,104, with a monthly income of £509. Right. So on top of your state pension, you're talking about 1,500 quid a month. It's still not living the dream, is it?
It's not living the dream. It's surviving,
It's
I
surviving.
guess.
It's surviving. Yeah.
Surviving, not thriving.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I think a lot of people out there would think 150 grand in a pension pot is all right.
Yeah,
I think
because it
a lot of people,
sounds like big numbers, but
yeah,
when you're bringing it down to the brutal reality of this drawdown, that really isn't, as you say, that isn't going to cut the mustard. That isn't going to be what we aspire to, what we've worked our whole lives for.
yeah. I think you think about that. You think about people who maybe work 40, 50 years of their life and they're expecting to retire in relative comfort. £1,500 a month is not comfort. That's
Yeah.
you say it's surviving. So yeah, I think that's why I think a lot of people are sleepwalking into this. I mean, these are stats taken Office for National Statistics. So it's there for anyone to go look up if you're so inclined. I suggest everyone who has got pension or is relying on one should go do that immediately and start understanding the maths behind pensions. Now, I've got to say there are some good things about pensions. Okay, so probably didn't say that. One, they're very tax efficient when you invest in. Okay, great.
You're talking more specifically, Nick, around people that are self-administering their pension. So like a SIP or a SAS, if they're putting money into that from their businesses, it's extremely tax efficient. But for the average Joe who's got a PAYE job,
It's still tax efficient because particularly if your company you're working with is also paying in. All right. So, you do need to factor that in. And it's great. Yeah. Your company also contributes to pension. So I don't know how many people would know about the two different types of pensions that existed. Right. So you had what's called a defined benefit type of pension. And you had and that was where there's a final salary scheme essentially where, you work for, generally this is where people work for a company for 20, 30 years and they would then retire generally quite early. And this is, my father-in-law, this is, I was probably used him as an example, worked for a bank for, I don't know, 30, 40 years. And he had a defined benefit scheme. And then when he retired, there was an income set for life, and he retired reasonably young. I think he was still in his 50s, or certainly no more than early 60s, and that then pays out. A few, what,
Most of those benefits, though, most of those salary schemes that were final salary, they disappeared like 20, 25 years ago. I think I have one from my very first
yeah,
job. And I remember being in that job and them telling me that it was changing and it was being, wiped out. And me thinking, whatever,
yeah,
no
exactly.
idea what that means.
Well, all they did was change one word.
Yeah.
They changed the word from defined benefit scheme to defined contribution scheme,
Yeah.
right? And I think probably 99.9% of people that happened to, like you, went, okay, whatever. Yeah, so it's one word different. How different can it be? But it's massively different. Because instead of your benefit being defined, which is what you retire on, say the sum you get paid monthly is based on your final salary. So it was the benefit. It became a defined contribution scheme. So therefore, what you were paid out was based on what you put in. And for most people, that was nowhere near enough. And so, because I think a lot of companies did the maths, and I don't know whether it links back to the whole Robert Maxwell Mirror Group pension fund thing that happened in the 90s. Maybe not. I don't know. But that was a big moment in pensions industry, I think, when they realized that, pensions could disappear very quickly. But anyway, yeah. So a lot of companies did the maths and realized it's just totally unaffordable, going forward. And, the government as well, with final salary schemes like public service, it all got changed.
Yeah.
This happened to another friend of mine who basically pretty much designed his entire life plan around being in the fire service. Yeah, because started young, get in there in your early 20s, do your 30 years, so you can retire essentially in your early 50s with a defined benefit scheme that would see you through the rest of your life on a pretty tidy, if you rose up the ranks, you'd be on a really nice, tidy, monthly income. And then that got changed. I think it was like 20 years in, got changed. And his entire life plan was like, just ripped away.
Yeah.
Because you have no control. The government can just change the rules. And they've just done it again pretty recently, haven't they?
They have. Yeah. And
It slips kind of under the radar a bit.
you're talking about the pension grab.
I am.
Yeah. And I think you're right. It's slipped under the radar. No one's really talking about what it actually means for people on the streets, the general public. The pension grab, which Rachel Reeves announced in the budgets, the budget came and went and everyone was expecting some big things. And to the average Joe, it was like, actually, there wasn't as much in there that affects me in this present moment as they thought. But what they didn't perhaps account for was how it affects their future. And the fact that inheritance has been kind of muddled in with pensions is being described by industry specialists as the biggest pension grab of a lifetime.
Yeah. So basically, pensions were exempt from inheritance tax, and now they're not from 2027. That's it, right? So a little thing slipped through. Most people like future me problem, but actually, it's massive, absolutely huge. Maybe not for you personally, but if you're thinking of a pension that you're going to leave as an investment for your family, then it's major. It's major. So I think it was very clever how they kind of slipped that through. While there's so much going on, everyone's thinking of now, me. And so it was all based on inheritance tax, which is, again, as you say, future me problem. It's actually not personally going to affect me because I'm going to be dead. But for those that want to leave a legacy or think about their families, that it's huge. It is massive. So,
And we've touched upon people that have a pension, a private pension already. There is a vast population sector that don't even have a private pension, that might not be in a position to be even from their PAYE job paying in. I mean, everyone has if they're over a certain salary level, their company has to pay into a pension. They match the contributions up to sort of 3% or something like 3 or 4%. So, but if you're on a 20K salary and you're putting 3% of that away annually for a pension and your company's matching it, that's not built into much, is it? So people that are self-employed can actually opt out of that and have nothing apart from a state pension.
Yeah.
So there's lots of little subsectors of the population that really are, I guess they just don't understand how much they're going to need in retirement. What time of age does that retirement actually come in for them? Because I think what we're going to find is that people are going to have to work and work and work far beyond 60, potentially far beyond 70.
I think so. I mean, it's already happening. If you, I was down at B&Q the other day, and I would say probably more than half of staff in there were, I would say, over 60, and there were definitely some in their 70s. And into any supermarket, any service industry, I think you see a lot of this. You see a lot of people who should be retired working, and I think this is only going to continue. So what I wanted to as well is just have a look at, okay, let's look at some other numbers. Let's look at, okay, what's the average salary in the UK at the moment?
It's got to be about 27, 28,000.
It's about 27, but if you include the Southeast, it's 35, almost 36 a year. Okay, so let's just look at somebody who is on an average UK salary. So someone that's on 36 grand a year. Okay, if they wanted to maintain that standard of living, let's just look at maintaining that standard of living, right? 36 grand a year, what would they need to have in a pension pot, do you think? I know you did
Well,
really quickly, Sarah.
I mean, I'm going to pull a number out. It's going to be probably $1 million.
Right, it doesn't quite have to be a million. Okay, so for an average salary, okay, well, let's say you needed 2/3 of that because you get the state pension. All right.
And at some point, we're going to have to. We'll hopefully have paid off the mortgages, be unencumbered.
Yeah. So let's say you needed 2/3 of that. So you needed 24 grand a year. Okay. State pension, that tops it up to 36. So you're back to 36 with the state. So to get £24,000 a year, which is £2 grand a month pension, with a 4% drawdown, you would need a pot 600,000. That is, well, how many times what the average pot is? And even if you're, for your single female in your 60s, that's still 4 times that.
And that.
Right, £600,000 is the target investment pot that you need. Okay, so assuming that, and you want to retire at 67, what do you think monthly contributions would need to be?
Well,
I'm quizzing
600.
you because I'm kind of quizzing everybody else. I want everyone to be thinking of these numbers because I haven't prepped you on this, so you're trying to do the math in your head right now. I know you are.
I'm blind, and as you can tell, I've got a bit of a cold, so my head isn't working, and he's throwing arithmetic at me at this time. Okay, so I'm thinking, Nick, to get a 2,000 pension pot, which is equatable to 600,000 in your actual the final amount in that pension, you've got to be putting in regularly on a monthly basis around 600, 700 pounds. Would that be about right?
It depends when you start. So it's all about time in the market here. It depends when you start. So savvy and you start early. If you're 25, how many 25-year-olds are thinking about piling money into a pension?
I hope a lot more. And if you're 25 and listening to us, get on it now.
Yeah. £285 a month if you're 25.
Okay.
That's doable.
Doable.
That's doable.
Yeah.
If you're 30, that goes up to £380. Still doable. Okay. If you're 40 and you suddenly have a wake up and go, I need a pension, £715 a month. Remember, this is based on your average salary, which is 36,000.
Of that average salary, then you've got to put 700, just over 700 a month away.
So think about it. So what average salary? 36,000. So you're going to be taxed. What are you taxed on that, Sarah? 30%?
20%. 20%
on that. So you're already down to
national insurance as well.
Yeah. So you're down at what? Net 20, 22?
About 20, 27, I'd say.
Right. So your net 27, which is what a month? It's about 2 and a bit grand a month,
Yeah.
2,200 a month. 700 of that, it's got to go into your pension.
30 over just, yeah, about 30%,
Yeah.
28% of it going away.
Yeah. So 28%'s got to go. This is at age 40, right?
Well, that immediately cuts, you know, well, potentially your ability to pay rent and mortgage.
Yep.
It cuts holidays.
Yeah.
So basically, your present self is going to have to really make some sacrifices in terms of what you're spending your money on, just so your future self can actually exist.
Yeah. So that's age 40. If you leave it a bit later, even just 5 years later and you're 45, that amount goes up to £1,000 a month.
The compounding effect of age on this is huge.
Huge. Right? It's £1,000 a month, which I think for a lot of people on average, so would be not doable. Totally. If you leave it even later to your 50, it's £1,500 a month. And at 55, it's £2,300 a month, which is basically your entire salary. So that is just to get, that's to get a pot of £600,000 at age 67, which will give you the equivalent of an annual average UK salary right now, which again, I'm going to say, it's not living the dream, is it?
Not living the dream is durable.
Yeah,
But
it's
yeah.
livable, it's doing okay, but is it living the dream? I don't think it's not yachts and champagne and flying around the world.
It's not, and it's possibly not even, just if we're not taking into account life moments that happen that need injections of cash. And I'm talking, just knowing it from my parents, knees go, hips go. And yes, we have an NHS at the moment. And yes, it's an amazing, incredible service, but they are underfunded and you will have to wait an awful long time to get certain limbs and hips and joints and things replaced via the NHS. And for your quality of life, wouldn't it be lovely if you could go private and get that done so that you can live, a comfortable and active life? I think the average hip at the moment probably costs 10K, 11K.
Yeah.
So, if you want that type of thing and you want to, I guess, just enjoy in comfort having worked all your life, then you've got to account for that type of thing as well.
Yeah, and I think that's the point where if you did have a pension, you'd be tempted to then take a 10 grand lump sum out, which you can. Take a 10 grand lump. Suddenly your pot is now down 10 grand. Yeah, which means your monthly's less. And so that has a slippery slope downwards. And, life expectancy is going up. This pension's got to last you. If you want to retire mid-60s, it might have to last you 30 years.
Nick, we have absolutely scared the bejesus out of people.
Good. I'm glad.
I think there's two messages. Well, the first message, and I need to say it now, is if you haven't got a private pension, look into that, especially now. But even so, there are bigger things that we can do, aren't there, to, I guess, reverse this walk into poverty that I think, people are sleepwalking into a future poverty as an older generation. You are going to have to keep working and working beyond the age that you expect. And I think there are certain things that we can start doing now to rectify that.
Yeah, I mean, firstly, the wake up call's got me there. You got to understand what's going on here and make a decision that you're not prepared to sleepwalk towards a life in poverty when you retire. Okay, that's decision one. Is got to do something else. So, and then that's got to be either, you've got to look at your pension, understand it, do the maths, work out a plan. Okay, that's one way. Great. And, as a lot of investment advisors would talk about, there are tax benefits and blah, blah, blah. But what was with pensions, you don't have control and the government can change the rules on you. Right. So what else can people do? Obviously, we're property people. So I think we've got a solution. Again, it requires taking action and, really understanding what it is, understanding that there is a problem, that this problem exists. So what would you advise, Sarah? What would What we can advise on is property. We can't advise on pensions, but we can advise on property.
Absolutely. So we can definitely use property as a tool for retirement, and it's what a lot of people come into property for. They sort of say, "Oh yeah, we'll buy a couple of buy-to-lets and have that as our retirement. We can cash that in and use the lump sums of those properties as buy-to-let investments. We can use that in retirement." Well, actually, it's even a step back from that, because I think people that go into buying property as an amateur for retirement just think it's the equity in the buy-to-let that they can use. But we kind of re-engineer that and say, do you know what? Actually, you can just use the cash flow from that buy-to-let. The equity is the added gravy. It's the bonus as well. However, imagine a world where you have a portfolio of buy-to-lets or HMOs or any of the strategies that we all employ, where they're providing cash flow every month. And yes, there's expenses, and yes, there's active involvement in that, but they're providing a cash flow every month that can pay exactly what you need to not just survive retirement, but to thrive.
Absolutely. I think what would be a good, I think, monthly income for somebody in retirement that could, let's assume, you paid off your house, you got no debt, no expenses, or your expenses. So what would be a good, monthly income that you would think will allow you to do all the things you want to do?
I think probably three grand would be a starting point of, just being able to enjoy some stuff and have your family along to enjoy the ride.
Yeah, and I think if you push that to say five grand, which is 60K a year, I always like to push it.
Oh, you do. He's so greedy, everyone.
But if you said five, I mean, later in life, if you've got stuff paid off, what can I do if you've got 5 grand? 5 grand a month is, treats. It is treating your grandkids. It is holidays. It is, living a really nice, I think, lifestyle in retirement. Yeah, and that's 5 grand a month, 60K a year. The thing about property is you can control it. You're not just handing over to somebody else or let someone else manage that, which is what a pension fund would be. But you can actually control it. You can take that responsibility. You've got a small portfolio of houses. You can go visit them. You can see them. You can touch them. And the biggest benefit for me as well would be the fact that rents are inflation linked. As inflation goes up, rents go up. So naturally, your income would rise in line with inflation. And inflation also erodes away the debt on your houses if you buy them with a mortgage.
Okay, so we're looking at 5K a month as a target. What does that actually mean in terms of property and where you are now?
Okay, so I think if you're starting from absolute scratch, never bought property, I would look at starting with a small buy-to-let portfolio. Okay, so find the right area where you can buy houses at the buy-to-let model as we teach it would be buying below 100K. I know everyone in London saying, "What? You can't buy houses under 100K?" Yes, you can, just not in London. Um, and looking for high yielding areas. So we go after the income side of it. For us, it's all the capital growth is a bonus. You naturally get it, but you're after the income. Okay, so build up a small portfolio, 3, 4, 5 buy-to-lets. What's a good buy-to-let income, Sarah, for you at the moment?
Well, I think we've got anywhere between 300 to 400 on our buy-to-let portfolio. So that's per property generating, bearing in mind all the costs that go with that, sort of between £300 to £400 a month.
Yeah. So if you had a portfolio of, say, I don't know, 4 of those, that's straight away, that's £1,200 a month. 5 of those, you're talking about £1,500 a month straight away.
Yeah.
Now, I know there might be people out there thinking, I've got to go buy 5 houses. That sounds a lot. Okay. But when you just get into a system and you're not buying houses at 300 grand, you're buying them at 70, 80. It's just breaking it down into steps and what you need to do. But actually, once you understand how it works, getting a small portfolio of like 4 or 5 houses, buy-to-let houses, is actually really doable. A lot of people might be thinking, but that sounds like a lot of work. I've got to go and manage all these houses. And if I live in the South, how am I going to be managing houses if I have to buy them somewhere else? I know a lot of people would think that. And the answer would be, obviously, we outsource that. We have somebody else manage them. This is not about creating another job, which being a traditional kind of landlord is a job. That's not what we're teaching or to advising. It's, using all the good property managers that are out there to manage those portfolios.
Yeah.
So a small portfolio, you've got maybe £1,500 a month coming in. So what do we need to do then to get up to that 3, 4, 5K a month mark?
So as we move up from the foundation level of buy-to-let investments, which I adore, I think they're amazing, and I will continue and always buy buy-to-lets. But we have got other things. So we can have things like HMOs, so a home of multiple occupancy, where people rent a room on an AST within a property of anything from 4, 5, 6 up to 11 rooms in a house, whatever it could be. These are higher cash flowing properties. So you would expect to have 1,000 upwards at least from a cash flow perspective on a HMO or co-living, living property. Anything up to to 2, 3, 4 grand and beyond, depending on where it's situated and how many rooms you've got. Obviously, the initial expense is a little bit more than buy-to-let, the refurb, there's more compliance. So there's more involvement within an HMO, but the cash flow is better. Other things within that sort of higher involvement, higher input in the beginning, but generates far more as it comes out, would be things like serviced accommodation, where people are buying short stay accommodation properties, renovating that through and marketing it on portals and their own websites, of course, through to, commercial and bigger projects like that, which are obviously far more involvement, far more business orientated. But the cash flow from these can be a lot higher as well.
Yeah, so there's a load of ways of doing it. A lot of those terms, I think, for people might sound a bit scary. But even if you take commercial property, I think a lot of people would be put off by that. But commercial property could be a little shop unit. One little shop unit could net you 500 quid a month. Yeah. So, there are ways and means of doing this. But even if you had like a relatively modest portfolio of 4 buy-to-lets and 2 HMOs, I look at my HMO portfolio. We don't do big HMOs. They're 6 beds generally is our model. Most of ours would cash flow between £1,200 and £1,500 a month. 3 of those, there's 4 grand a month, 4.5 grand a month, plus 4 buy-to-lets. There's your 5. You're done.
Yeah.
So for a lot of people thinking they've only, buying, 6 houses might sound scary, but actually, if you just break it down and you can achieve that over we've had plenty of our members of our network have done that less than 3 years.
Yeah, and you don't have to do it in 3 years. If 3 years sound, "Oh, that's too much," just span it over whatever period you need. Everyone is starting from a different start point. Everyone has a starting capital that's different. So this is never a comparison thing, and it's never a race. It bespoke to you. But I think the most important thing to say is that if you are sort of targeting that 5K a month, it is very doable. It's a very simple process that is complex at points, but we have a very simple system to follow to get the end result. And we are talking, as Nick has said, we're talking potentially 5 buy-to-lets and a couple of HMOs. And it makes it sound easy to say it from that perspective. And yes, it takes a little bit of work, but is that worth what you're going to get out of it? Is your future self, who wants to retire at sort of 60 or even bring it down a bit at 55, is that person going to thank you for putting the extra effort in now to build that portfolio so that yourself and your family can actually have a quality of life when you retire?
Yeah, and that's a decision I think people need to make. Have a look at it and just go, do I want to change this outcome? Yeah, and if you do, you do need to take some action. Whether you persist with a pension, but you need to understand the maths and take some action on that side, or you look at alternatives. Property is obviously what we're talking about here. There are others. Just don't go and buy crypto. unless
Or
you
don't rely on buying crypto.
really, really know what you're doing. What I love about houses is, they're there, they're solid. Generally they appreciate over time. You can drive income from those houses if you know what you're doing. And that can be, ring fenced in a tax efficient way. It can be at arm's length from the government. It's a lot harder for them to go after wealth held in property, particularly if you structure it in the right way. The government tends to go after the easy things. Yeah. They go after the easy things because they can, so pensions is there. It's pretty easy for them to change the rules on it. Much harder for them to try and, get tax from properties if you're structured in a totally tax efficient, legally tax efficient way. So it's about taking back control, I think, a lot of this, and just making that decision. Yeah, look, I don't want to be in poverty when I'm older. I've got to do something now. Okay, great. There's options. And I think people think maybe property is too hard, or you've got to do too much. I've got to go and buy 20 buy-to-lets, to have a reasonable income. Well, you don't. We've just shown a portfolio of 6 or 7 houses can do exactly what you needed to do. And it doesn't have to take 20 years, 30 years to do it. You can do it in much less than that.
You can. And you can have a lot of fun along the way as well. Meet some good people, enjoy the journey of it. And hopefully, you've seen how there are answers to the issue of people sleepwalking into poverty as they go towards retirement age. But you have to take the action today and now so that you can actually reap those rewards later.
And it's not too late. We've had plenty of people come join our network who are in their 60s thinking it's too late. It's not too late.
Correct.
It really isn't. Yeah, you can sort it out, but you've got to make that decision, take that action.
Yeah.
Well, I hope there's been a bit of a wake-up call. I know probably some scary numbers in there, but I think it needs to be said. So yes, pensions do have some good aspects to them, but I don't think enough to make them worthwhile pursuing. I think there's better options.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining me then, Sarah.
Thank you.
How can people get hold of us if they need to?
So please do go onto our website, which is thispropertylife.co.uk. There's lots of free resources on there that you can download and read at your leisure. We are also on Instagram. So if you go to Instagram at thispropertylife, give us a follow, subscribe to us on your favorite platform, Spotify or Apple, so that you don't miss future episodes.
And if you like looking at us whilst you listen, then go over to YouTube as well. We're on there. But do get in contact. If you've got any questions, please do fire questions over to us. We're always happy to answer those. And any great questions, we can build a future episode around, because if you're asking it, there'll be lots of other people asking it also. So do come talk to us, and we look forward to seeing you very soon. Take care.